Good evening, Steeler fans. Welcome back to another Wednesday and Know Your Enemy. Here today, I'm your host, Geoffrey Benedict. Here with me, as always, Shannon White. Shannon, how you doing?
I'm awesome. Ready to Buccaneer football.
All right. With us tonight to talk about the Buccaneers, J.C. Allen from Pewter Report. J.C. Allen, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Always excited to chop up football, learn about a little bit about another team, and kind of spread the knowledge I know about this team. So I'm excited to be here and chop up some Bucs Steelers talk with you guys.
All right. Well, I'm going to kick it right off the bat with one of the most important topics, especially for this week, the injury report. How are the Bucs faring on the injury side?
Yeah, so I mean, both of these teams have a list about a mile long, it looks like. And there's some good news and some bad news. There's a bunch of guys who have not participated today. Akeem Hicks is one of these guys who's day-to-day. I'd be surprised to see him out there. Logan Ryan, their safety that they got, has already essentially been ruled out with a foot injury. He won't be playing. Carl Nassib with an illness. Sean Murphy-Bunting popped his quad. He got some MRIs today, so he did not participate. We'll see what that's looking like. Julio Jones still dealing with that partially torn PCL, is not participating, as well as Jalen Darden, who had a tooth injury, and Russell Gage, who popped up, with a hamstring injury earlier on this season. Then last week it was a back. Now he looks like he's dealing with an ankle injury, did not participate. But there was some good news. It wasn't all bad news. Cam Brake came back with a concussion. He's still in the protocol, but we'll see if he's cleared. Carlton Davis, who left the game last week with a hip injury, is back to full participation, as is Brashad Perriman, who missed last week, and limited participation for Mike Edwards, one of their top safeties, with an elbow injury, and Chris Godwin dealing with that hip knee. But I'm told it's really nothing to worry about. He should be able to go. Same thing with Donovan Smith, who's dealing with an elbow. But man, this Bucs team has been banged up early and often from the get-go. The wide receiver position, the offensive line position has taken hits. Now you're starting to see it cross over to that secondary position, where if you watch the Bucs or know anything about the Bucs, last year was decimated to the point that they brought Richard Sherman out from his walker and brought him back into the NFL. So, they are definitely banged up. They're not a healthy team, and we know the biggest thing on any team's chances of winning a Super Bowl is health. And so far, that has not been in the Bucs' favor. But better get these injuries in early in the season. I think, as long as they're not ones that are going to linger throughout the season, I think that's always a good sign. But it's not looking at across the way from the Steelers. You guys are dealing with quite a few injuries as well on your end.
Yeah, been watching the Bucs this year whenever it get possible, and from what we've seen, as soon as Brady showed up, 2 years in a row, they were the class of that conference, that division. And they just look different this year, partly because, like you said, Gronkowski's not there, but a lot of it's just injuries. And they've, the skill position players, especially, which has affected Brady more than I think age has. Right. They're starting to get some guys back. Godwin's starting to get healthy, and like you said, Gage might be back. And but as far as, because I know you was telling us before the show, you're a transplanted from the Great North. You're a New Englander that now in the sunshine-friendly state there in right. Florida. And contrary to rumor, you were there first, and Brady followed you, not the other way around. Yeah. But I know you're very familiar with Brady. How do you think he's looked so far this year? And is most of these, his numbers are down a little bit? Is a lot of that because of the injuries, or you think Father Time is catching up a little bit?
No, I think he's looked sharp as he's ever been. I think he's looked, his 3 years here, he's looked like he's got more zip, more velocity to his throws and everything like that. I think this year, throughout the first 4 games, was just not having his weapons. I mean, you look at the guys who are out, and then last week, kind of dealing with a little bit of a nagging shoulder. It's not something to worry about, but I think you saw some of that injury was impacting some of his throws. Underthrew Scotty Miller when he had him deep, missed a few other throws that isn't typically Brady-like. I don't think Father Time's there. I don't think Father Time will be there next year if he decides to. I think the way that him and Alex Guerrero, his trainer, has put together what they do on a day-to-day, they literally are living to be able to play football. They're training even in the off season with their diet and everything they're doing. Now he'll have a cheat day here and there. We'll have a cheeseburger, but after that, he's back on a binge of avocado ice cream and avocado tequila throughout the next 6 months. So I think Brady has looked definitely sharp, but the weapons and the offensive line too. You look at the offensive line. He lost his Pro Bowl center and Ryan Jensen the second day of training camp. Ali Marpet retired, who finally made his first Pro Bowl. Very, very overdue. He decided to retire. Alex Kappa signed over with the Cincinnati Bengals. They brought in Shaq Mason from the Patriots, which I believe is an upgrade, and he's looked phenomenal. But now you're dealing with a rookie and left guard Luke Gedeke. And you're dealing with Robert Hainsey, who's a first-year center. Now, Robert Hainsey, I think, has looked fine. He's certainly not Ryan Jensen. He doesn't bring that attitude, toughness, and that reputation and that skill set. He's still learning his way, and I don't think that's been an issue. But left guard's been an issue too. I mean, you used to look at the first play of the game. Grady Jarrett was able to just ragdoll him to the side and put pressure on Brady. And Brady mentioned, without mentioning any names, he mentioned, early in the game, someone misses assignment. And now you're wondering, are they going to miss that assignment the entire game? So you've got that in the back of your head. And I like to think he's probably talking about Luke Gedeke, especially with that pressure and Grady Jarrett. He said, I woke up last night had nightmares about him, woke up looking for him around my shoulder. So you look at those types of things. I think offensive line has had a little bit to do with it. Now, Brady's still got the quickest release. One of the quickest releases in the NFL, had the second quickest release behind Big Ben last year. But he also had the most 20-plus yard throws down the field where Big Ben was just dunking and dinking and, because he didn't have the time either. So, I think that's helped. Not having those wide receivers, those weapons, inconsistent play. Young guys still kind of learning their way have definitely kind of hurt the team. But you saw last week he had a majority of his weapons. They didn't run the ball as much, but they passed it through the air. Same thing against the Chiefs, came up short. He had a good game passing through the air. And the coaches have wanted to make this team more multiple. They wanted to have more balance between running and passing. But the reality of this is a passing first offense. And with the wide receivers and Brady at the quarterback, you got to be throwing the ball if you're going to want to win games and win them big. And we're seeing that the last 2 weeks that's been the key to the offense. You
mentioned the injuries to some of his key weapons really affecting him. And I was looking through the stats before the show, and I was surprised to see Leonard Fournette is second in receiving yards on this team.
Right.
And the only real receiver who's taken off so far is Mike Evans. Right. Is that simply lack familiarity, or and like the moving in and out, shuffling pieces around and people not being 100%? Or is Leonard Fournette really come into his own as a receiver here in the NFL?
Well, even before he got to the Bucs, his final year with the Jags, he had about 70 receptions. He's always been a decent receiving back, and this year it's just bumped up. You mentioned, he's second in receiving yards, but I believe he's first in receptions on the team. And last year he finished third in receptions. We know Tom Brady's always been an advocate for those pass catching backs. You go down the line from Kevin Falk to Denny Woodhead, James Vereen, James White, all those different players who have been a huge impactful players out of the backfield. And Leonard Fournette's just the next one. Last week, the Falcons played a lot of off coverage, deep coverage, try to prevent that deep ball. So they tore him up underneath to Leonard Fournette. He had 10 catches on 11 targets, 80-something yards, and a touchdown. So Brady's going to take, first and foremost, Brady's always going to take what's given to him. He's always looking for that big home run play, but if it's not there, he's got no problem checking it down, 4-yard catch for Leonard Fournette and say, hey, go make some magic happen. And we've seen him do that. We've seen also Rachaad White get into the mix, their third-round rookie this year. He's getting more and more comfortable in the system. The game is slowing down for him, and he's got 10 receptions for 85 yards on his own. And I think you're going to see him start to get incorporated a lot more into the game. And I think you'll probably see him even more so this week against the Steelers, especially if it gets out of hand a little earlier. Let Leonard, keep those legs fresh for Lenny. Let Rachaad White get a majority of those bulk snaps and get him going in both the running game and in the passing game.
I think I've said this many times on the show, is with Brady, he learned it from Belichick. And what made them the most successful coach quarterback combination in NFL history is no ego. Belichick simplifies everything. He'll take away your number one weapon,
Right.
and he will exploit your number one weakness. It seems so simple, but a lot of coaches won't do it. They'll have a play that works, and they're like, well, I'm going to save it to the third quarter. Not Belichick or not Brady. They will do it over and over and over. As we remember in some of the AFC Championship games where the running backs and the tight ends had 20 catches.
All right.
Because the Steelers, the 3-4 defense is always susceptible in the middle, and they're even worse this year. The Steelers' middle of the field is everybody's playground. And so if you got any fantasy guys, if they're a running back, a tight end, or a slot receiver, you play them because they're going to have huge numbers. And that concerns me because if you get Fournette in space, he is very hard to tackle one-on-one. Right. And if you're not bringing it physically, he will run you over. The Steelers have an issue there in that the linebackers are not fast and they're not very physical. That's a bad combination. And the slot corners are small and not very physical. So who should the Steelers – I know we're talking about Fournette and you mentioned White. Brady always has a slot guy that he really likes, whether it was Edelman or Welker or, who else should the Steelers really be concerned with, maybe out of the slot or at the tight end position?
Yeah, well, since Cole Beasley retired, there's no more short white guys on the team for him to go after. But Chris Godwin's a slot guy in this offense, and if you look at Bruce Arians' offense, he's always had a bigger slot guy who's an exceptional at blocking, who can do is versatile enough to line up on the outside, but works predominantly in the slot. You look at the guys. You guys remember this name I'm about to say, Hines Ward. Hines Ward was one of the very first of Bruce Arians' guys. You go to Indianapolis with Reggie Wayne. You go over to Larry Fitzgerald, and now it's Chris Godwin. And this offense is that iteration guy who's going to get his nose dirty in the blocking, in the running game, in the blocking, and can line up everywhere, but can do it predominantly, and most of his damage is going to come from the slot. So that's the guy they're going to have to look out for. As far as tight ends, it looks like rookie tight end Cade Otton is going to. I think he's going to be tight end 1 by the end of the season. Cam Brate will be more of a rotational guy. Cam Brate's still very, Brady trusts him. He's a good receiving threat, but that's what he is. He's a receiving threat tight end. He's tried to improve his blocking over the years. It's improved a little bit, but it's still not at that point where it's on par with what the Bucs need and what they're looking for, especially with younger interior offensive linemen. So I think Cade Otton's a guy to look out for. Rashad White, Leonard Fournette, obviously those are guys who can do some damage. Scotty Miller is actually kind of improved his game, known for mostly as a deep threat. Last week, he had a few dig routes over the middle that I think he catches some of these receivers cornerbacks by surprise, where they're expecting him to go deep and he cuts it in and they're like, whoa, you're a deep guy. What are you doing? So I think those are some guys to kind of look out for who might do some damage against the Steelers. You mentioned the linebackers who, they're not the fastest guys. They're not the physical guys. They are very athletic, especially a guy like Miles Jack. But again, he's got a good athleticism, that not necessarily speed isn't his strongest suit in physicality. So Leonard Fournette, I had him on my show yesterday, and that's one thing that he wants to do is just kind of impose his will. You look at that Cowboys game towards the end, cornerbacks didn't want to tackle him anymore. They were just kind of throwing their bodies at him. They didn't want any part of him. Yesterday on Sunday against the Falcons, he broke 3 tackles before he finally went out of bounds on a 9-yard catch and run. So he's definitely able to do that. And I think that that's the way they're going to want to attack them. But it's going to take time. It's going to take time for him to locate those guys and go through his reads and find those checkdowns if they're there, because the Steelers, while they're injured up, they still got a really good guy that they're going to probably place over that rookie left guard Luke Gedeke and Cam Hayward, and he can do some damage. 1 sack, 1 forced fumble on the year, but we know his presence goes much more than stats can be. So they're going to have their hands full. Hopefully we don't see any more BS calls. No one likes to see those for the game, but I gotta say, Brady, for everything, it feels like Brady gets all the calls. He's actually 16th in the league the last, I think, 5 years with roughing the passer calls, and has only had one since, besides yesterday or Sunday rather, has only had one other one since 2019. So he's not getting the calls as much as people think. But still, quarterback, you're always looking for the calls. Throw the flag.
Yeah, he's. I think at this point, people just anytime he gets it, they're like, really,
Again,
really, again, you're gonna do this again. Yeah, I think that's where that is. We have one guy we haven't really talked about on this offense that really needs to be talked about a decent bit is Mike Evans.
yes.
Where does he rank in the NFL today? Because this was a big debate heading up to this season where people were arguing, is Mike Evans going to be a Hall of Famer? Is Mike Evans even a top receiver? Like, I saw it all over Twitter, all over NFL Talk. Where does Mike Evans rank, in your opinion? You're down there covering it. And do you think he's a Hall of Fame receiver?
I think he's a top 5 wide receiver in this league. I mean, a lot of thing about Mike Evans is they think he's just like this big jump ball contested receiver, red zone threat, but he's so much more than that. He's been working out of the slot more. He's got the speed to really separate from different guys. You see he's done it with multiple different quarterbacks. At this point, I think he's fringe Hall of Fame if he continues what he's been doing. I mean, you look at the touchdown production. If he goes another year, makes it 9 straight years, 1,000 yards, he's going to have close to those numbers. But I think he's still one of the most underrated wide receivers in the game. People don't often give him his acknowledgement, his credit. Same thing with Levante David in the middle linebacker. I mean, he's one of these guys that just gets no love. You look at Luke Kuechly and Bobby Wagner, and he outpaces him in some stats alone, and they're always talked about ahead of him in that draft class. But I think Mike Evans, he's on his way. I definitely think he's on his way. If they get another ring, and he gets another, maybe, gets 10 years of 1,000 yards straight, maybe 20 more touchdowns, I think he's definitely right in that conversation. Problem is, as we get more and more, there's so many dynamic athletes and so many players that have putting up these numbers. It used to be you had a number 1 wide receiver, and that was kind of it. The number 2 wide receiver was just this guy. Now with the league expanding to such a passing offense, number 2 wide receivers are still getting 1,000 yards, and they're putting up crazy stats as well. And it's going to get harder and harder, I think, for running backs to make it in. Maybe a little bit easier, but also a little bit more convoluted for wide receivers to get in. So I think he's got a really good shot. It's just continuing that, steady production that he's had throughout his career, and he could potentially make it in there.
When Brady came, it's kind of like when LeBron went to Miami. Everybody wanted to go, a veteran, to try to have a chance to win a ring. Well, a lot of the defensive line that the Buccaneers assembled were guys that come in that wanted that shot, and they had a lot of the veterans that got, like Dominican Sue and Jason Pierre-Paul and different guys like that. But I know some of them guys are gone now. And, I'm incredibly envious of Devin White and Lamont David because that's the best inside linebacker tandem in the NFL. That's what the Steelers are used to having.
Right.
They're just in the wrong uniform because the Steelers do not have anything that resembles what the Steelers' legacy usually is at that position. And it's something that's going to have to be addressed. But right now, that's who I know. I know White and David. And who is it now on the defense? They're still very effective. But who's really stepped up so far this year to make them that way? Because they've had a lot of injuries on the defensive side of the ball as well, especially in the secondary. So who's really stood out this year on defense?
Yeah, I think the first name you go to is, besides Devin White and Levante David, is Antoine Winfield Jr. He's quickly solidifying himself as one of the best young safeties in the league. They've been using him in a variety of roles: free safety, strong safety, but mostly at nickel cornerback, or just nickel. I think that's a position that's kind of bucked, whether it's a cornerback or a safety. You see Tyrann Mathieu played a lot there. There's also a couple other players who've played a lot there who are more of a safety than a traditional cornerback. But I think, Antoine Winfield has certainly set himself apart. I think another guy, Carlton Davis, doesn't get enough love for what he does. He continuously shuts down some of the best wide receivers in the game, or holds them to unlikely games that they're usually having. I go back to the NFC Championship game against the Packers, held Devontae Adams to 6 catches for 60-something yards. That's shutting down Devontae Adams, one of the best wide receivers, but he's done it against everybody. You name it: Hopkins in his prime, Julio Jones in his prime. You look at the guys, CeeDee Lamb was targeted 11 times, had 2 catches for like 10 yards. He's able to just kind of shut down players at an unbelievable clip and doesn't get talked about. Jamel Dean, opposite of him, he's ranked as one of the best cornerbacks in the league this year. He's talking to him today in the locker room. He's like, man, I hope I get some more targets against the Steelers, because quarterbacks, he's been so good. Quarterbacks just aren't targeting him right now. So there's definitely a lot of good players. Mike Edwards, another pick six, leads the league in pick sixes since 2020. He's coming into his own, stepping into that full-time role. So I think their secondary, where it was banged up last year and was kind of a weakness, has turned into a strength of theirs. They're very good in pass coverage, and they are all very good at getting their hands on the ball. Dean's got 2 interceptions. Carlton Davis has led the league in pass deflection since 2019 with the most in the NFL. And then he moved down to the line. I mean, Vita Vea, he's struggled a little bit this year. He's been better as a pass rusher than a run blocker, but I think that's just getting more, like you mentioned it, because he had Sue next to him, who was his mentor, who's his guy. He's called Big Girl for so long, and he's not there. So it's taking that adjustment, taking on that bigger leadership role. He had Akeem Hicks next to him, which is those two guys next to each other are just a pair that you don't want to run into in a back alley, I tell you that much. But he's been out for the last 4 weeks, so he's got another guy next to him he feels comfortable, but I think he'll pick it up and he'll get this should be a get right game too against this offensive line the Steelers are trotting out there. He's another guy. They have a lot of confidence in their first round pick from last year, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka on the outside, and then Shaq Barrett. I mean, it's still one of the best linebackers. The sack numbers haven't been where he wants them to be this year, but the pressures certainly have been. So I think at each level, they've got some really good playmakers to get after the quarterback, to defend the pass and stop the run, which is something they've struggled with the past couple of games. So stopping the run, and they look to get back on track. But it's I've been impressed with the individual play out of a lot of these guys. It's just coming together as a team, communicating, getting on the same page, and playing together as a team to get back to what they were doing those first 3 weeks when they only let up 27 points in 3 games.
All right. Well, before we go, I want to give you a chance to make a prediction for this game. How do you see this game turning out? If you can give us a final score prediction, we'd love to have it.
I think injuries are the telltale of this game, right? Steelers are banged up. We probably won't know more till Friday what it's really going to look like, who's going to be out, who's not going to be out. But even if you look at the Steelers side too, Fitzpatrick's been really good for them. But everybody else on that defense, which, after TJ Watt went out, kind of it started to crumble a little bit, I think. So I think the Bucs can definitely put up some points on this on the Steelers team. I'm not saying they go all out like the Bills did last week, who definitely left a couple scores on the table, but I could see them scoring around 31, 34 points. And the Steelers are going to have a tough time. I mean, the Bucs defense is a little banged up in some areas, but I still think they are very capable of causing destruction, in the pass rushing game. I think this is a game that they want to get right, stopping the run. I think that's been an onus on them. You saw Atlanta still put up over 150 yards. Atlanta was down 21 rushing in the fourth quarter. I don't know what they're doing. They got nowhere else to pass. But and then, Todd Bowles is going to get these guys up. It's a rookie quarterback. He's bound to make mistakes, but you got to be careful. And I was talking to Jamel Dean about that today. It's when you play a rookie mistake, you got a quarterback. He's bound to make a few mistakes, but he's also, because he's in that, he's got nothing to lose, right? So he's going to make some plays too. He's going to risk take some chances. A veteran quarterback might not take, and that could hurt them. So they've got to play disciplined ball. I think the Steelers put some points on the board. I don't think it's just 3 points this week. So let's go 34-13. Bucks. We'll go 34-13 Bucks. They find a way to get a touchdown, a couple field goals. Boswell's one of the best to do it. And that's what I got for right now. Subject to change, come Friday report though.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show, talking to us here. Let people know where they can see, read your work, listen to you, and get all your shows.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, if you're on Twitter, follow me at Twitter at JC Allen NFL. All of my work is over at Pewter Report. pewterreport.com, at Pewter Report on Twitter. I just did an interview with Leonard Fournette yesterday. That's on our YouTube channel, Pewter Report TV, if you want to check that out. I'm always a football fan first. If I didn't cover the Bucs, if I wasn't a fan of the Pats, if anything, I still want to learn as much as I can about football. So if you're one of those guys and you want to keep tabs on every team in the league, Pewter Report's your best bet to follow for the most in-depth coverage of the Buccaneers. So I thank you guys for having me on there. Thanks for all the fans for communicating in the comments. I read you guys. I saw you. And we'll have to do this again sometime.
All right. Thank you, JC.
Thanks, JC.
Have a good one, guys.
All right. Okay, Shannon. We can talk Tampa Bay with other people, but as we're seeing in the comments, as we all know, this game, the opponent isn't as relevant as the problems inside the Steelers team. The problems the Steelers have. Mike Tomlin absolutely admitted it, talked about it, and said, and when he was asked, I think it was Ryan Clark's comments, and he said, with the amount of problems we have to deal with, like inside the team, that's irrelevant. Like Ryan Clark can say whatever he wants because we know how bad we played. We know it. We know how bad we are right now. And he also said there's no easy fixes for this. And I think we can all see that too, that there's more problems than injuries. There's more problems than scheme. There's more problems than just talent. So all across the board, just problems everywhere. I want to start with the defense. I want to ask you if you could isolate. And if you have to, I'm saying we know there's multiple levels of problems. If you had to isolate one problem with the defense where you would focus your energy fixing first, what would that be?
Oh man, one. You're limiting me to one.
Yeah.
So, I can't get past watching the secondary. I can't get past the startling difference between how the Steelers corners play versus everybody else in the league. There's so much press coverage, shadowing receivers, and influencing them off the line one way or the other. And the Steelers, it's always 5 to 6 yard cushion and easy receptions. Even if a guy starts out the game cold, quarterbacks find the rhythm because the middle's always open and he can complete some slants and some dig routes, and it's always open. And then therefore he finds his rhythm and his confidence. And they can't adjust because they don't have the athleticism and the speed at corner to change. I mean, the guys they have are 4-5 and up guys. And they just, the NFL it's changed. There's too much speed out there, and they're not particularly big either. So, now you have a lot of the tall, lanky receivers who, unlike Chase Claypool, can high point the ball and use their reach and their length. And so I just, even if they fix some things and Watt comes back and that pass rush will help, Watt will help cure a lot of the things that ail them, but that secondary has been an issue for years. And the scheme and the player evaluation, the talent evaluation at the position has to change, because to me that's the most glaring weakness. And then there's others, but you limited me to one. So
yeah. And one of the things that surprises me is you go back 2019 when they brought in Minkah Fitzpatrick and they brought in Terrell Austin. That defense, that secondary was just suffocating. They're so good. 2020, they were still really good. 2 years after that, we're like, can you guys cover like anyone? Is there anyone out there you can actually cover? So I agree with you. That is a big problem.
But wasn't Hayden and Nelson? Steven Nelson. I mean, they played some man coverage. It looked different than what we're seeing now.
Yeah.
I mean, totally different. And somebody was blaming it on that they were aggressive on that 98-yard touchdown pass. What stuck out to me so glaringly was Davis just run right through the double team. The only way Norwood
took it
and Wallace would have kept up, he said, well, Norwood took a bad angle. It doesn't matter. The only way they would have kept up was to tackle him or draw a pass interference because he burned them so bad. After he caught the ball, Norwood he just started to track because he knew I ain't catching that dude.
Yeah.
And so that lack of speed is startling.
I mean, and also to your point of not being aggressive enough and giving people cushions and letting them run, you watch that play. They didn't alter his route.
Nope.
They didn't interfere with him.
They
just tried to run with him. You got two defensive backs that aren't super fast just trying to run with Gabe Davis.
Yeah.
And Josh Allen was just like, and I mean, I'm sure that's what other teams felt like when we had, when you go back to 2009, 2010, when Mike Wallace and Ben Roethlisberger were just were tearing up teams with those passes where he's like, well, you let him run.
Yep.
I'm going to throw to him. And Josh Allen can hit those balls. And Gabe Davis can get deep, and you got Stephon Diggs underneath. It's a nightmare over there. This game, that secondary has to deal with Mike Evans. And then with all the safety help going to the outside and with the linebackers coming up and biting on play action and coming up to try and stop the run, Leonard Fournette right there. It's almost like this team is sitting there with two perfect weapons to attack the Steelers with. You've got a big physical guy that you can't just let Mike Evans run. You can't let Mike Evans run. You have to have some way of interfering with his route and stopping him. You can't, and even if you run with him, he's just going to high point the ball over you. You've got to mess up his route and his timing. And then Leonard Fournette, if that middle's open and they're letting Leonard Fournette get the ball underneath with some, and letting him turn and run, it's over.
If Devin Bush has to have a day of tackling Leonard Fournette in the open field, the Steelers are in a lot of trouble. If Robert Spillane has got to chase Godwin across the field on these crossers, the Steelers are in a lot of trouble. And I don't see them changing. One, because there's a degree of stubbornness. I was ignorant. I thought that the Steelers might play some zero coverage. I watched Buffalo and the Chiefs past weekend. There was times that everybody was at the line of scrimmage, and at the snap of the ball, it was like a fire sale. I mean, people was breaking in every direction. And they have the athleticism, the speed to get back at drops. Even if they're there at the line of scrimmage at the snap, the Steelers guys, they don't have that athleticism speed to do that.
Nope.
So even if Brian Flores wanted to do like he did with Miami, which they crushed the Ravens and stopped Lamar Jackson, he did that a lot that game. And teams are doing that to, as the Bills did to Pickett, to try to disguise what was coming. And it takes teams did it to Ben. And as smart as Ben was, the Steelers can't do that. They don't have the athleticism to do that. So I did not realize how startlingly slow the secondary was till this season started. And then I just realized that their hands are tied.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. And a big part of that last game, Terrell Edmonds is one of your few, like Terrell Edmonds and Minkah Fitzpatrick are your athletes at the secondary. Yep. That's who you have.
Lead.
And when Terrell was out, what amazed me watching the film going through is how they were putting Minkah up short, really to take away them getting beat underneath by Stephon Diggs. And the play that Gabe Davis scored that 98-yard touchdown, the deep safeties were Arthur Millette and Trey Norwood. For your two deep defenders. That's not fast.
No.
That's not going to do it. And I mean, if you have Terrell Edmonds in there, Terrell Edmonds can run with the Gabe Davis. He might not make the greatest plays. He might not, be the best safety overall, but in a play like that, he can at least run with the guy. He can at least shrink that window instead of just letting him run through. So if he comes back, that's a little help. But I agree with you. A lot of the times I'm looking at this scheme and I'm like, this scheme is terrible. And then I'm looking at the players and I'm like, well, when they go away from that scheme, it's almost worse. It's just like damned if you do and damned if you don't. You really don't have it.
If Ryan Shazier could outrun anybody in the Steelers secondary, I believe that. I really do. And you take one of the best young edge rushers in the NFL, Micah Parsons, he can outrun anybody in the Steelers secondary.
Yeah. Oh, TJ Watt would outrun them all. TJ Watt right now. He could outrun all those guys.
I mean, at least that's bad. That's really bad.
Yeah. You know what? I'd like to see Kenny Pickett in a foot race with our secondary. Just see who wins that. Because that'd be a good race. That'd be pretty good.
It would be
keep Minka and Terrell out of there, just the cornerbacks.
Yeah.
That'd be a tough race for them. Oh man.
Oh,
I'm gonna add my thought on the defensive weakness. I absolutely agree with the secondary. And another one, I think that the talent level limits what the Steelers can do, and that's the defensive line.
Yeah.
Cam Hayward, obviously with TJ out, Cam Hayward is the focus.
Mm-hmm.
And with him next to Alex Highsmith, a lot of the time in the traditional setup for the Steelers, they've been moving around to avoid it. But in those guys' best positions, they're right next to each other. If you're playing Alex Highsmith and Cameron Hayward, where they're the most comfortable and most productive, they're right next to each other, and you're just sliding the line that way and saying, you guys got 3 offensive linemen blocking you with a running back to help, and we'll just shut down that side and let someone else try to beat us. And it's hard to say because I love Cameron Hayward. He's a Hall of Famer, and he still has it. He's banged up right now. He's getting more focus. He is not able to dominate the way he did last year, even right now. Larry Ogunjobi has been solid. He's been really solid, but he's not Stephon Tuitt. He's not what Stephon Tuitt was. I would put him below. If you go back to 2019, I'd put Ogunjobi a bit below Javon Hargrave and what he did for the Steelers in 2019. Like, he's not that level, but he's been a very good signing. When you're signing a guy for the money they signed, for the role they signed, yeah, he's been good. Tyson Alualu is not the same player right now. And he's, 35? Like, it's possible he's not – it's possible his days are behind him and he's almost done. We're seeing – and he even talked about it. He almost retired last season. Now he's not quite the guy he was. Like, the Steelers really on the defensive line are hoping – I mean – the hope at this point is TJ Watt comes back. Obviously, that's a big impact. And that frees up a little more space for Cameron Hayward. But we're looking at DeMarvin Leal and saying, hopefully this guy really, really turns it on over the course of his rookie season, because otherwise this defensive line, they're nothing impressive. They're not collapsing the pocket. They're not stopping the run. Like, I agree with you. Devin Bush isn't a good run defender. He isn't. But when they drafted him and brought him in, they had a defensive line in front of him that you could take 6 blockers in the run game and they'd lose to the Steelers' front 4. They would flat out lose, and you'd see Stephon Tuitt make a run tackle where both him and Cameron Hayward were supposed to be double teamed. And not only could the linemen not get off the combo blocks to the linebackers, they flat out lost. And you'd see the running back have nowhere to go with just those 4. There's plays in 2019 where Devin Bush is a little slow to read the run play. And by the time he gets there, the guy's been tackled for no gain or for 1 yard gain because the defensive line was that good. And now that's not the case.
But if you watch, I know you watched the replay and watched each individual play. If you watch Chase Claypool play football and you watch Devin Bush play football, there's not a love of the game there. Yeah. You'll see guys with half their talent out there fighting and wanting to be first to contact. They want to defend every blade of grass, or they want to, throw that extra block. I mean, you watch Jalen Warren, you watch George Pickens throwing a block 30 yards downfield to try to help out a teammate, come across the field to do it. There's a difference in a level of intensity and desire. They showed 2 clips that I'd noticed already just from watching the game again, whereas Bush just keeps waiting for the action to get to him, whereas he never touched anybody.
Yeah.
He doesn't come towards that. He don't come forward. It's like, okay, if it comes over here, I've got this. But what I'm saying is, for a middle linebacker, that just doesn't cut it.
Yeah, you got to get in there.
Yeah, and he doesn't have that junkyard dog mentality, that nose for the football, that the love of contact. I mean, I don't know what else to say it.
Yeah.
You mentioned something earlier, and you're right. When Hayward and Highsmith was on the same side of the field, I never seen anybody since Watt get chipped by the running back going out as much as they did Highsmith.
Mm-hmm.
He would go right into his move, getting ready to do that spin he likes to, and he's getting chipped by the running back every time.
Yep.
He eventually just kind of, you could tell he just getting worn out and beat up. And they was blocking Hayward a lot with one guy. And I know he's hurt, and we know that he's dealing with injuries, but he's not the same.
He's not the same dude right now.
He will always be one of the strongest guys in the league. But if he ain't as spry as he was, or that little bit of quickness that made him effective, especially as a pass rusher, collapsing that pocket and everything, what if he moves inside? Because they can lengthen his career if he can slide inside, because he's definitely strong enough.
Yeah.
And then you play a guy like Loudermilk on one side and Ogunjobi on the other side, and then keep these other guys as your depth pieces. Because Lulu looks like, I hate to say it, but he looks like he's done.
Yeah, he does.
Unless something happens, he's dead. He got dead legs. And I've never seen him get pushed around and end up on the ground as much as he has this year, even when he was with Jacksonville on a really bad team. We know that Wormley is not he's a situational pass rusher. He's a quality depth guy, but if you put him out there too much, he gets exposed. And I know they put Montravius Adams in there, but he's dealing with his own injuries. But when he's been in there, he's been invisible. I was surprised a lot of times when he would run up at the end of the play, when a tackle had been made, and I'm like, I didn't realize Adams was in there.
Yeah.
He's the nose tackle. That's not good. He's not influencing and tying up blockers. Like you said, the defensive line is it looks like it's one of the huge weaknesses because it's older.
Mm-hmm.
And lacking the spatial talent that we've gotten used to and accustomed to. So I definitely agree with you. But the age of Hayward, and for all that happening now, it's very concerning, and I'm really wondering if he might have to slide inside.
Yeah, kind of an Alu move, going to a rotational
exactly.
role. Hey, I've wanted it for 2 years now. I still do. I want the Steelers to take a real, big time first round defensive tackle, a guy like a Christian Barmore, a guy like that who's just a physical monster that can collapse the pocket. Put him in there before Hayward gets too old, before Hayward retires. Give him 2 or 3 years. The way Tampa Bay talks about Vita Vea playing with Ndamukong Suh. Right? That's what I want. I want someone in there learning from Cameron Hayward, learning from someone who's connected with that. And there's a reason I want that. And you talked about it earlier. You talked about Chase Claypool, and you talked about Devin Bush. And I want to talk a little bit about a player who never showed to me a personal love of the game, but when he played with the Steelers, would still show it on the field, still showed intensity on the field. And that's Martavis Bryant. When Martavis Bryant was with the Steelers and they had Antonio Brown in there and they had that locker room worked hard. They were a little crazy. They were a little egotistical, but they worked. And they put that work to show on the field. Martavis Bryant came in the leagues as one of the worst-handed receivers in college. They were like, this guy can't catch, which is why he fell to the 4th round, because he dropped everything. They came in, Richard Mann's like, we can drill that out of him. Antonio Brown does the jugs machine. Martavis Bryant's going to do the jugs machines. Antonio Brown blocks people. Martavis Bryant's going to block people. Martavis Bryant comes in, does the work, because that's what everyone did on that team. You did. They had that leadership. And as a receiver, you put in the work, you blocked, you caught the ball. And we saw Martavis Bryant embrace that. And he's not a guy I would sit there and say that's a guy who loves football. No, Martavis Bryant wasn't that dude. He wasn't that guy. But yet he did it when that leadership was there. And you go back to when Hines Ward was there. Those guys are leaders. And I always talk about this. One of the things that always stands out to me is you look at Lynn Swann, John Stallworth, and Hines Ward, and you look at their playoff records. Mike Tomlin and Bill Cowher and Chuck Noll all have losing playoff records, except for the years where you have John Stallworth and Lynn Swann playing, and when you have Hines Ward playing. And we won. Because those guys weren't just they weren't just great players. They were leaders and they were tone setters.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing this offense doesn't have is leadership in the wide receiver room at all. You don't see those guys, staying after practice and sweating it to get rid of their drops. They've done work. It's been put in, but not like we used to see. Not like we saw with Richard Mann and Antonio Brown and those teams. We don't see that passion.
Mm-hmm.
We don't like who in the wide receiver room choose out Chase Claypool or George Pickens for sloughing off a route.
Nobody.
When Deontay Johnson decides to not run too hard on a route, who reads him the riot act?
Mm-hmm.
Who's chewing him out on the sideline? Nobody's doing it.
Mm-mm.
There's nobody to do it. They wanted Najee Harris to be that leader, but he's not even like your running back can't come up to a guy who's been a veteran more than him and come up and tell him, hey, run that route right.
Mm.
Hines Ward would do that. Antonio Brown would chew you out. Ben Roethlisberger would chew you out.
Yeah, but if you hear today, when they interview Kenny Pickett, he's talking about it was a much more precise practice.
Yep.
More focused. Guys were running the routes and realizing that you might not be that first read, but hey, this might open up and I'm going to have to hit you and we got to go full speed at practice. He said Pickett is a rookie. He's only had one start. He's already saying they have to improve their intensity, their attention to detail. He shows that leadership skill.
Yep.
We'd love to have somebody in the wide receiver room. It ain't happening. We're not seeing it, but it might be that the rookie will lead us. He might have to be. And to me, I get the impression with Pickett, you're either going to get on board and come on for the ride or you're going to get left behind.
Yeah.
And as Bradshaw used to do with Swan and Stallworth, they're begging for the ball and he's the one throwing it. So they want to keep Kenny Pickett happy if they want to keep their targets up. So hopefully that'll be a positive influence.
Yeah, and I'd like to see George Pickens because I think we've seen George Pickens is a little crazy. I don't think I'm out on a stretch with that. You watch how he plays. You watch how he carries himself, how he talks. He's got a little craziness to him, right? Mm-hmm. We had that before with Antonio Brown, right? But Antonio Brown also had that room working.
Yeah.
He had that room working hard when he was here. And they did it because of him and also in spite of him. Like he wasn't the player you wanted him to be, but his work ethic was crazy. And he dragged those other guys with him, and his intensity level was unmatched. Maybe, a little too high on the intensity level. But if George Pickens is that kind of receiver, then maybe this turns around with George Pickens being the guy who's like, crazy enough that he might fight you on the sideline when you don't run your route right. Like maybe that's a good thing. Yeah. And I'd like to see it. I'd love to see it. And it is noticeable when Kenny Pickett is out there. You see a little bit more intensity from those receivers because if you're not the first read, you still have a good chance of getting the ball.
Yeah.
Mitchell Trubisky, it got pretty obvious that, he was a 1, maybe 2 read guy.
Max.
If you're the third read, you might as well just stand at the line and just look off in the distance. You're not getting the ball.
2 things I want to run by you that really stuck out to me is I'm concerned about Pat Freiermuth because that's 3 concussions in a short period of time.
Oh, yeah.
And once you get them, then you start getting them easier. And the way he plays, and he's so intense, and he does try to get extra yardage. There's nothing. There was nothing anybody could have done. That hit was, from both sides, and that would have concussed a lot of people. But now I'm concerned about his long-term, future. The other thing is Pickens is like you said, he's ultra intense. AB's work ethic was legendary to the point that people were embarrassed if they didn't work hard because he made them look so bad. They didn't want, as you said, he set the example.
Mm-hmm.
And you want your best player setting the example. Do you think that I watching Pickens, everything he does, from his blocking to his intensity after the catch. I mean, you have to make him go down. He doesn't just go down.
Yeah,
he's fighting guys, dragging guys. first off, are you as concerned as I am about Freiermuth? And second, you think that you're seeing some of that AB intensity in Pickens?
Well, I'll go with Pickens first. I do think we're seeing a bit. I'm not going to put him on that level. Antonio Brown's like one of the best things I was ever told was your greatest strengths are your greatest weaknesses. There's a saying. Like whatever you're best at, that's also going to be what causes what you're kind of worst at. And Antonio Brown was one of those cases where the dude was it was not manageable. His intensity, his competitiveness, it kind of fuels his craziness. You see it in how when he gets talking crazy, it's very much I'm being disrespected. It's very much you don't like, and he brings such intensity to that it's not healthy, right? But that also fueled his success on the field. It fueled this kid who went from a guy who couldn't run routes and couldn't catch balls very well, who was a 6th-round pick, to be a punt returner, turns into one of the greatest receivers we've ever seen. That's insane. And it's a little bit of his insanity that made that happen, but also that brought him down. So George Pickens, he's not on that level. He's not on AB level, but there is a little bit of that in there. There is some more intensity, definitely, than we've seen from recent receivers. Juju Smith-Schuster was laid back. Chase Claypool's very laid back. Deontay Johnson, he's got a different kind of competitiveness. He's kind of I don't know how to describe his person. He's just a different personality type than that. George Pickens is that intense competitor kind of guy. I think that's why he's so good at contested catches, and a guy like Chase Claypool isn't. Because Claypool is just like running his route, doing his thing, and he doesn't have that like crazy in him that he has to get that ball. Like that ball is mine, and I'm getting it. I don't care what I have to do to get it. I'm going to come down with it. That George Pickens has that. I do want to address something we've been talking about a lot in the comments, a lot. And this is a big topic right now because anytime a team is really struggling, a position group is struggling, we look at the position coach. When the offense is struggling, we look at the offense coordinator. When the entire team is terrible and playing inexcusably bad, a lot of focus gets put on the head coach too, right? And I mean, really, it doesn't take much for people to start calling for Tomlin's head in this town. We have kind of ridiculous expectations as Steeler fans, but right now, this is legitimately bad. This is legitimately bad. How much, Shannon, do you put on the coaches? And on what coaches do you put the burden here? Not either the blame for it going wrong, or I'm going to extend it a little past that and say responsibility for getting it fixed.
It's an organizational problem. So I start with AR2, with Kevin Colbert, now Con, to Tomlin, and then on down. With the coaching staff, Tomlin is the guy that calls the shots. So he has to take that responsibility. They're out-coached regularly, basically every week. They lack discipline. They have the same mistakes, make the same mistakes every week. It's reoccurring. These issues have been going on now for years. I said in a comment today in one of the articles that Tomlin inherited a team not too removed from a Super Bowl with a franchise quarterback ready-made, ready to go, and a lot of veterans on that team that took on a lot of that leadership. And, and he won a Super Bowl, and he's done an excellent job. He's a great players coach, but he's not an X's and O's coach. So he relies on his coordinators for schematically. And the Steelers have become so dependent on their superstars. And each year they are losing superstars. Guys are aging out or retiring or leaving through free agency. And the guys they replace them with each time are not quite as good. You go from AB, you get Deontay Johnson. He's a good player, but, obviously not as good. Marquise Pouncey, leadership there. I mean, there's just so many guys you could talk about. But Tomlin's never had to be a part of a rebuilding situation. If that's why that they're so scared to say the word, I don't know. But they're obviously in it. It's basically been since 2019 because they have not been a serious contender. Even with the 11-0 start in 2020, it was a lot of everybody kept saying, well, they got all these holes, they got all these problems. And you remember we would do a quarterly grades. And my grades was always lower than a lot of my fellow writers. And the reason being is because I kept saying, I want to see improvement each quarter of the season so that they will be a better team at the end.
Mm-hmm.
They never did that. They peaked out in the middle of the season, and then they degressed the rest of the season for various reasons, whether injuries but that goes back to the coordinators, which is the head coach's responsibility. So, people saying, "Oh, fire Tom" and all that stuff. That's nonsense. But he has to show that he's the right guy for this rebuild. He's never had to do one. Yep. He's never even been a part of one. And so he has to show that he can change. And, sometimes guys don't want to. He cut his teeth on the Tampa too. He's a dodgy, disciple. I mean, he might not want to change. He might not be able to see what everybody else is seeing. And Ben's no longer around. You take Ben and TJ Watt off that team last year, they might have won 3 or 4 games. That's the honest to God truth. Yeah. And you're seeing it now. It was not Ben. And what scares me is that a lot of times it's like we kept hearing quarterback mobility and this and that. And we have to have all this for Canada's offense to work. Even with the stuff they've given him that he needed, that we all thought he needed, it looks very similar. Yep. It's the same few plays. It's the same, that creativity we keep expecting. Was it because Ben was not mobile? I mean, Ben was a shell of himself, but the dude could read defenses. He could throw the ball still. But the Colbert just has neglected the offensive defensive lines so badly, the foundations of this organization, of their success, that and you paint a barn, it's still an old barn. You put skill position guys there, but they don't have the foundation to let them be successful. It's an organization problem, and I think it started honestly with the loss of Dan Rooney.
Yeah,
and
that's a huge loss that really I don't think we talk about.
Anybody really realizes how big a lot of this organization. So I want to see Art Rooney number 2. I want to see him step up. And he might have to make the tough decisions if Tomlin can't. But Tomlin's got to show he can be the right man for this rebuild, because that's what it is.
Okay, that was great. I agree with you. I agree with you there. I'm not going to disagree with you at all. I've seen a lot of talk about Matt Canada. And I actually want to give my theory on Matt Canada. I'm going to go into my conspiracy theory shell. I'm going to get out my strings and start putting pictures together. But this is my take on Matt Canada. And I think Matt Canada came in because Tomlin, Colbert, the AR2, the Steelers upper, powers that be, the important people in the organization decided that this offense post Ben needed to be more in line with the Chiefs, more in line with all these other offenses that are taking up. The Bills run the same kind of plays. Like I think it was KT Smith showed in the offseason. The Bills run everything Matt Canada runs. Mm-hmm. The Bills run the same offense the Steelers are running right now. It's the same offense. It's the same plays. Maybe the plays are being called better. Maybe they're being executed better, taught better, whatever. But it's the same kind of offensive design. And I look at that and I think back to when the Steelers were looking to make this change. You look back to 2020, you look back to 2021, right? Todd Haley, how he left the Steelers, everyone knew Ben was involved. I think Ben got credit where people were like, Ben came in and made them fire Tom. No. But the relationship between Todd Haley and Ben Roethlisberger played a part in his contract not being renewed. Mike Munchak was also involved in that. It's no coincidence. I've talked about that before. He dropped all of his coaching things within hours of them announcing that Todd Haley would not return. That quarterback then goes into 2019 and gets seriously injured. 2020, you've got a guy coming back from a serious injury, right? 2021, in 2021, he was a guy, his own GM was like, maybe we should move on to this guy, but we can't because he needs to play for our salary cap situation. And kudos to Ben for really coming back to help the team, even though he knew he wasn't wanted by everybody. Probably the first time in his career ever faced people in the organization being like, you know what, I actually would rather not have him on the field. But that's a tough situation. You had an offensive line that had to be completely rebuilt from the ground up. We lost all 5 offensive linemen within 2 years. They're all gone. Like, that's crazy. Other than, 4 of the 5. Chukwuma Okorafor was a backup until, that all happened, but he was still around. You have a new offensive scheme that needs to be instilled while you have a quarterback that in the past has not been the most open to changing his scheme, right? When Todd Haley came in, he didn't like it. He preferred Bruce Arians' system. And when he went out, Fichtner brought back stuff and ran kind of Ben's offense that Ben wanted to run. And also, if you look at 2018, when the offense was healthy, it worked. When the offense was actually talented, it went pretty well. After that, it didn't so much. But when you take that kind of a situation and you say, we want to instill massive change in a team, we want to hire an offensive coordinator to come in here and implement a new offense with a quarterback that may not be the easiest situation for you to work with, because you have to respect Ben Roethlisberger. You have to respect what he can do on the field. And at the same time, you're saying, hey, I want you to run plays that don't fit what you do. Right? No quarterback. When Bruce Arians brought Tom Brady in, he was like, we're going to do things differently. It quickly changed. They stopped doing it Bruce Arians' way, and they started doing audibles from Tom Brady. They started changing how they did hot routes to fit Tom Brady. Because you don't take a quarterback who has that much success in one way of doing things and say, now we're going to flip it and you need to have success doing it this way. Doesn't happen, right? I'm not blaming Ben. I'm just saying that's a tough situation that Ben went through. Kudos to him for how he handled it with class and hard work and learned to do a lot of stuff that he hadn't done before. But that's also a hard situation for an offensive coordinator. And when you're also talking rebuilding the offensive line, you're talking going through a period that looks like it's going to be a rebuild, even if the team won't say it. When we sit here and see people say, why didn't the Steelers go get a high-end offensive coordinator? Well, who's taking that job? Who are you getting going to look at that situation and say, yeah, I want to work with a 38-year-old quarterback, and I want to work with an offensive line that needs to be completely rebuilt from the ground up. And I want to do this while completely trying to change the offense and how it works. And who do they get? The guy who'd been out of work in a year from college, who runs all of it, who his entire thing is running that exact offense. And if you really don't like Matt Canada, right? If you think he's the guy and he still has a chance, well, we're going to see it. We're going to see his chance this year and next year, maybe. If you're a guy who looks at Matt Canada and says, no, this guy isn't the answer, understand at the end of this season, the offensive line won't be bad, right? It's not terrible right now. It's not good, but it's all right. You can live with this offensive line. You have a young quarterback who shows promise. You have a talented group of wide receivers with some youth in George Pickens that look like a top-end guy. You have talent here. You have a system implemented. If the Steelers want to go out after this season and go get someone who coaches it, runs it, play calls it better than Matt Canada, they're in a much better position to do it than they were 2 years ago. Right? The commitment I see is the Steelers committing to changing the style of their offense. And this was the best way to do it. And we're going to see how big their commitment is to Matt Canada and how long they stick with him. We'll see that. That's going to be a big deal. But to me, that's my thoughts on the offense are this is a transition that they needed to go through, and they weren't in a position to go out and get a really good coach to do it.
Well, they got issues on both sides of the ball that it's not a quick fix, as we know.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that they need to embrace, the rebuild, and it needs to start now from the way they coach, player usage, everything. And it needs to start now because if not, this will be a wasted season.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Shannon. We got a little over here our time. Griping about the Steelers' problems. Little therapy session here for Shannon and me. Let's get a prediction for this game coming up.
Oh goodness. I just have nightmares, flashbacks of Brady, and then when I see the issues the Steelers are having currently, and how he's the perfect quarterback to exploit that, especially if you can't get any pressure on him at all, which they can't without Watt. Trying to tackle that monster running back, whether he's running or catching it out of the backfield. So, and if they do have a stout defense, even though they have some injuries. So, I'm hoping that they can keep something around a 34-17 score. They won't cover the spread, obviously, but hopefully the Steelers can at least score 17 points and make it more respectable than last week.
Okay. Last week, I said I suspected the Steelers to be hit pretty hard. That I was saying we could see the Bills put up 40 on them. They got to 38. Yeah. I had the Steelers scoring more than 3 points.
Me too.
I don't have much more hope for this game. Mm-mm. When Kenny Pickett was really at his best, Pat Freiermuth was really involved. Uh-huh. And what we see from Pat Freiermuth this week, I don't think it's going to be the same level. Can George Pickens? I mean, really, you look at Kenny Pickens' passing stats. George Pickens has more than twice as many receiving yards as any other receiver. Leads in catches by a good margin. Like, that's the matchup there. Uh-huh. Can Tampa slow him down? They have the guys that do it. They have guys that do exactly that. Zach Gentry. Without Pat Freiermuth, I can't see Devin White and Levante David being scared of anybody coming out of the backfield. Even Najee Harris, fantastic receiver. Jalen Warren's a pretty good receiver in his own right. But if Pat Freiermuth isn't really rolling, I don't see this offense getting going much at all. I see another bad game. I don't think we see 38, but I'm going to go 31-6 for this game. I think it's ugly, and I don't think it's getting better. Like Tomlin said, there's too many problems for them to fix it and turn it around in 1 week and give a good showing against Tampa Bay. I don't think that's going to happen. Really hope I'm wrong, but I don't see it happening. This team is right now, organizationally, morale on the team leadership, injury status, scheme, everything is in shambles. Some of those can get fixed in a week. A lot of them can. Mm-hmm. All right, Shannon, anything you got coming out?
I've just got an article that I'm finishing up talking about how that the Steelers rebuild needs to start in earnest immediately. And again, that goes back to how they coach, how they evaluate player usage. Everything needs to start now.
Yep. I haven't been putting out as much stuff. It's been crazy for me. I had to move my mom up to Tennessee. So we've been crazy busy around here, but I do have a Vertex coming out. I've got it set up. I just got to actually finish it tonight and get it submitted so Dave can get it out there. But we're doing a Vertex on DeMarvin Leal. One of the few, we've got Kenny Pickett on offense and George Pickens that we're hoping turn into something special. DeMarvin Leal is that guy on the defense that you're looking at saying he is showing some promise. What could he become? What could happen? So that's what we got coming there. That's all I really have coming out. I want to thank everyone for listening, everyone for being here, part of the live chat. We got over 100 of you in here. It's great to have everyone. We got lots of interaction in the live chat. So thank you for all your comments. We read them all and we enjoy them. I want to thank our guest, JC Allen, for coming on. He was a great guest. We had a great time talking to him. As always, I want to thank everyone for being here. Make sure you're clicking over to BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, reading articles. You're checking out all the podcasts on the Behind the Steel Curtain family of podcasts. And as always, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Have a great week. And let's go Steelers.